We are nothing sacred. We are nothing sacred. We are nothing sacred.
With Maxwell Silverhammer.
We are nothing sacred. With cruise control. We are nothing sacred.
Oh, yes. Once again, folks, this is Nothing Sacred. I am Maxwell Silverhammer.
And I am Cruise Control.
And with us, we have an active police officer as well as stand-up comic, Vinnie Montez. Vinnie,
hey,
welcome to the show, man.
What's up? I'm here. I'm excited.
Thank you very much for joining us.
I'm a little afraid too, man. I'm a little afraid too. After seeing some of your guys' stuff, you're no holds barred. You just let it fly, don't you?
Yeah, we do, but we also respect people. First of all, you are an active, even if you weren't active, but you are having a police officer. So thank you very much for serving for your service.
We always thank first responders for their service. Man.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that can't do what you do, and I'm one of them. So I respect that, and we respect that. So thank you very much for that. Max, why don't you go ahead and lead away with some questions, man?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. First of all, we want to know give us a little rundown of your career in law enforcement. First off,
well, I was inspired by two guys, very young. When I was very young, probably in my 7, 8, 9, 6 years old, whatever. Ponch and John from Chips. I said one of these days I'm gonna be just like those guys. I'm gonna be a police officer. And I always thought there was like a moral to the story when you watched Ponch and John on Chips. And so I couldn't get. And you can't become a cop when you're a kid, but you can become a law enforcement explorer. So at the age of 14, I became an explorer, and all the way up until I was 21, I became a dispatcher when I was 18 because it was going to be a good experience. I could make some money doing it while I was going to school. And then I got hired. I went through the FTO program on patrol as a reserve deputy while I was finishing up college. And I got done with the patrol FTO program and I was like, hey, I'm ready for a full-time job in patrol. And they're like, nope. You need to go to the jail to get some seasoning, kid. And life experience, which I did. I needed a little bit of humility added to my life and everything. And so I worked as a jail deputy for a few years and then moved over to patrol and have been in operations the rest of my career, 25 years as an actual police officer. And I've done everything from DUI, narcotics, sergeant of patrol, and now as a commander. So it's just I've done a little bit of everything throughout my career. It's been awesome.
Oh, nice.
That's cool. Now, is there an age limit to become a police officer? I hear in some states there is.
I don't know I don't think we have one at all. I don't know if there's like some laws against that or something, but some agencies might have that in some states. I am not aware of that for us specifically in Colorado.
It's interesting. Okay. Yeah, because I interviewed a guy and he does those channels where they catch those child predators and things like that.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And he said he wanted to. He said he originally wanted to be a police officer, but where he's from in Houston, he said that at 18 he had to be 21 to be a police officer. So that's what's interesting there. So I've heard that from a few places. So that's why I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I think there are some states where you can become a police officer or something like a police officer when you're 18. And I know back in the day in Texas that you could be 18-ish for some stuff. But in Colorado, you got to be 21 for sure.
Oh, so it's wait a little while. So from 14, and obviously you're showing your age with the whole whole poncho thing from Chips.
Well, I'm not that old. I just barely turned 48. I've been in this business a long time. I've been in this business a long time. I don't feel old, but I definitely, sometimes mentally I'm not old. I'm not. I'm like ready to go. I'm like a 10-year-old kid just excited.
I think that's kind of the same thing as like you think, at a certain age you're going to think you're older, but you really don't until you actually move something some way wrong. You don't know what the hell you did. And you're like, we're all in our late 40s, so we all get that.
I talk about that in my stand-up because I have one of the things I talk about is like when you're a young cop, what I call out of the wrapper coming out of the academy, you're all excited to, get out there. Somebody's drinking underage, like, let's go, we're going to get them, but after you got 15 or 20 years on the job, you got to weigh the risk versus the reward. You know what I'm saying? Like I could pull something like a hamstring. Like if you see me running after somebody, hit that son of a bitch with your car. That's a homicide suspect. So I take what I've experienced in real life and, apply it to stand-up comedy. So.
And it's funny. It's interesting. Speaking of stand-up comedy, looking at your and listening to your stuff, you have a lot of not affiliation, but you get a lot of stuff on the Dry Bar Comedy. And I noticed that
Yeah.
one of your actual specials has over 1.4 mil views.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's
that's
crazy.
crazy, man. That's amazing, dude. Congratulations on that, man. So
Oh, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. They were very gracious to give me an opportunity on their platform. As a matter of fact, we just filmed my second special in October. So hopefully that'll come out here in early 2024 on Dry Bar. And I'm excited, man. So I've been very lucky to be able to get that privilege.
Let me
before we
ask you
go,
this. Oh, go ahead, dude.
You first, Max.
Oh, I was just gonna say. So, have you always kind of been a funny dude? Like, even growing up, were you involved in theater? Did you do what happened there?
Well, I really don't think I'm a funny guy. I think it's just my personality from my dad. My dad was an entertainer when I was growing up as a kid. He loved to sing with bands and stuff. And watching him interact with people, he always had jokes and he was always trying to make people laugh. You know, my dad was a hustler. You know, he didn't have a great education, neither one of my parents. And so my dad was the ability to like interact with people and make them feel good and, you know, get work and jobs and clients for cleaning when he had a cleaning company or a hauling business. So he's good at that. And so my personality really, you know, comes from my dad. And then growing up, I think if you ask a lot of my employees, the ones that I work with on our teams, I have a different personality at work than I do when I'm not working, because you have to have that balance. But I think that I was just a person who's always been a character. You know what I mean? Like when I walk into a room, I enjoy people. I feed off of the energy from being around people and talking to them. My better half is the opposite. She enjoys sitting on the patio with a glass of wine, reading a book for 4 hours. I'm thinking about killing myself if that was what I had to do. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we're just complete opposites. You know what I mean? But that's where I come from. My energy, I love talking to people. It's just a great experience.
Awesome. So it's a crazy, obviously a crazy jump for some people, maybe a crazy jump.
Yeah.
To go from being a police officer to a stand-up comedian. But it looks like from what I read a little bit about, it was a de-stressor for you at the beginning. Like, were you doing it locally and then just decided to? How did you make that jump? And obviously it has to do with your stress level or something like that.
Yeah. So, you know, when I was starting in law enforcement at 14 years old as an explorer, you're not a cop, but I would ride with officers and I'd be out right in the field, you know, watching what was unfolding right in front of me, while I was riding with them. And nobody talked about mental health and making sure that you were digesting things and processing them. So I remember being like 16 or 17 and helping take a dead body out of a car. And, you know, I got to have that experience. And I remember going home that night and being like, you know, I was in the shit tonight and it was so cool, you know, because you're just aspiring to be what these other people are that are around you that are truly full-time officers, men and women that are doing it. And you don't really realize as a young person or even as a young deputy when you first become a cop, you know, how that's going to impact you. That stuff is really it can impact you a lot and it can be emotionally impactful. And we never talked about mental health when I became an explorer or even my maybe the first 10 years of my career as a cop. I always worried if I told people that I was struggling with some of the things that I saw or experienced, that they may not think that I could back them up or I could be legitimate cover for them. So I kept it all bottled up and I really didn't talk about those things. And when I lost a kid in the field in roughly 2008, it was an auto accident. And I tried to save this kid's life, and I just couldn't. And there was no possibility of me really saving this kid at all. But I blamed myself, and it wasn't that it was just that call, but that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It just all came out, and I needed to learn to balance my life because my life was solely being a cop. You know, I people would give me a hard time at the agency. Why are you always here? You're always working. And I'm like, no, I'm just a good employee. You know, I really care. And that's great. But you got to have more than identity of who you are, because that's what oftentimes gets cops in trouble is they have a single identity as a police officer. And instead of it just being something somebody's saying to them, they take it personal because that's their single identity. So for me, balancing it out, it pushed me toward comedy. And I grew up watching, you know, Def Comedy Jam. You know, and Martin Lawrence. And I really fell in love with the Kings of Comedy, you know, D.L. Hughley, Bernie Mac. And you know, even George Lopez was a big inspiration for me just because I could relate to his comedy and the "Orale, pues, you know, we're over here," and talking about his grandmother and all that stuff. And so it just really gave me a chance to go do it. And when I got into comedy, I did not get into it for it to turn into what it is today. I simply did it to give myself an outlet. and it's really balanced my life. And I always tell people when like I'm on a plane or something like that, they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a stand-up comedian. They're like, oh my God, that's so cool. And then I kind of later let them know that I'm a cop also, and they're like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, bro. It's all good. But the response you get from leading with, yeah, I'm a police officer, everybody's like, oh shit, I don't know if I could say anything to this guy.
Well, that's probably part of the issue too, is that obviously one of the issues with stress with police officers is you're in your own world, because if the fact that you say that, well, he's a police officer in a comic, it's like, yeah, he probably also cooks sometimes too, and
yeah,
you probably actually he has pastimes. Maybe
and
he
takes a shit
reads.
once in a while.
He's not a goddamn. He's a cop, dude. I am the cop. I am the Terminator. It's like you go into a closet and they turn you off, and you
pull your batteries.
It's very fortuitous today. So I worked the University of Colorado football game. They bring agencies in from all over a couple of years ago, and I just released the video today with the permission of one of the sheriff, and it's me. There's like this really bougie area at the University of Colorado football games where they have the donors and stuff, and they get really good treatment, and after a certain point they got to close it off. It's like last call, and they're kicking everybody out. And so they send the Argus staff, which is like security people, to go clear people out. And then at the end, the people who are like, no, man, we're just going to finish one more, they're still there. And I went up and they're like, hey, can you help clear that crew out? And it was like, I don't know, 30, 40 people. And I was like, man, how do I approach this without being a jerk? Because, I just don't want the confrontation, especially with everything going on with law enforcement. So I decided to do a role play as Chris Farley. Motivational speaker Matt Foley,
yes,
and down by the river. And so I walk up and I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Farley, and I did this whole thing, and it's filmed with me in uniform going up and rousting the crowd and telling them that if they don't all leave, they don't understand they're going to be living in a van down by the river. And you should just see the faces on people with these huge smiles. I got a huge round of applause, and everybody just put their beer down and they left. And people ask me all the time, like, what do you get out of being a stand-up comedian, or why did you become a comic? And truly, I love making people laugh. And if I can use that skill, even in a situation where, we're just closing, it's, I labeled it as how to close out a college, what do you call it? Last call, how to close out a college last
party
call.
Or bar or
party. Yeah. Something like that is what I tagged it. And you just never know when you can, if you're making somebody laugh, it's really hard for them to be pissed off at you. It's really hard when people like you or feel like they should like you to be angry at you. So I've had good instances where I've been able to build rapport very quickly. And I think my guys see me be, kind and courteous to people. I'm not going to say I've never lost my cool with people, or probably been a little bit more brazen than sometimes maybe needed, because situations. I'm a human being,
No
but
shit, come on now.
But as a standard, I really try to set that example for our people. And man, I love it when I can get people to laugh. And I've had people I've contacted, and they're like, God, I hate this guy because he's a cop, but it's so hard to hate him because he's treating me so good and he's making me laugh. And that's what I'm aiming for, especially with the youth today. One of the other things I like to do is, like, people don't realize, they don't expect a cop to have as many followers. Not that I have a huge amount of followers, but almost 30K on Instagram, for example. That's a lot. And, these kids are like, yeah, man, you don't know nothing about the gram, or you don't know nothing about Insta. And I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, you want to bet some push-ups on who's got more followers? And they're like, bet. And so they always lose, and they're down there and they're doing push-ups on the ground. That makes me laugh.
That's funny. Well, you just answered my question, because I was going to ask you, have you ever used comedy or humor to de-escalate a situation? But obviously you have, and you gave an example just back there a little while ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had other ones where I've shown up I remember we were helping an outside agency, and I showed up at a disturbance at a house or something, and they're kicking everybody out to break up the party, and people are walking out and they're just looking at me. They're like, whatever, dude, whatever. They're leaving. And then we're making people sit down for just a little bit for whatever reason. And this girl looks at me, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't know if she's going to say something weird, like really mad at me. And she's like, I know you. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh shit, I saw you at Comedy Works in Denver. You're like, dude, this guy's legit. And so all of a sudden because she vouched for me, for lack of better words. All of a sudden, I'm her best friend, and all these people now, they warmed up and they're no longer like fuck the police. They're just like, hey, what's up, bro? How you doing? You know what's going on? So I really felt like that was super cool. I wish that could happen on all situations, but it's not going to. But it's definitely it's been a good experience.
So
Right.
So you just said, oh, you know what? I'm a funny guy, or I feel like I'm funny and I enjoy it. I have a good time with it, and
Yeah.
I'm just gonna decide to go. Like, did you first do like start with open mics?
Oh yeah.
That's the way. Yeah.
No good comic starts without. So, truly, I started my first set I ever did was at Comedy Works in Denver, one of the biggest clubs in the country. It's where all the A-listers come. And it took me, I'd say, 10 weeks. I had to sign up. They have this vetting process where you call in every single week. And finally, after about 10 weeks of calling in, I got what they call a 2-minute newbie set. And I got 2 minutes to come down and show my stuff. And then after I performed, they're like, hey, we'll bring you into our program. We're going to give you 3 minutes next time. But from 2000, let's say 2008 all the way to 2013, I had to call in every single week in order to get time once a month after that initial set. And it was only like 3 minutes. And then 1 year it moved up to 4. And then I finally made Almost Famous, which was the opportunity to open for people that were coming through on the road, like really big headliners. Chris D'Elia and you name it, who was coming through, Bob Marley, all these people coming through, just really good headliners. And you get to open for them. Yeah. And
Not that Bob Marley, dude.
Not that Bob Marley. There's a guy.
I was like, wait a minute.
Come on, dude. Come on, man.
Joey Coco Diaz. And it's been crazy. I mean, like, just the people I've been able to be in front of and share the stage with. And so the whole time you're doing that at that A-list club growing up, they're telling you, the owner, CEO, Wendy Curtis, is like, listen, kids. I don't know if she can call us kids, but she's like, listen, you people, you need to go and cut your chops and cut your teeth in some of these open mics around Denver. So I would spend running around all week when I had time off, going to like Lion's Lair and Kinga's and Club 404. And probably the worst one was the Squires Lounge. After the show on Tuesday nights at New Talent at Comedy Works, we'd all go downtown like around 11 o'clock off of Colfax in Denver, which was not too a good area at the time. And we go up and nobody would be listening to you while you're doing your jokes, let alone a cop who was up there talking about being a police officer. People are like, fuck you, kill yourself. Denver PD was known to arrest people, while we were doing shows and stuff. And it was just a mayhem, but nobody listened to you. It was just a rite of passage, but nobody knew. I didn't know. Fast forward to where I am in the last 4 or 5 years, having that ability to just go right over the top of people without even blinking an eye. All that was preparatory work for, getting to where I'm at today. And, it's like anything else. Like if you become a cop, you don't start out as a narcotics sergeant. You start out as a brand new deputy coming out of the academy, and then you work your way up through that. You just got to have the experience, and that experience, the foundation. People think I've only been doing comedy for like 4 or 5 years, but I've been doing comedy since 2008, 2007.
Yeah.
Oh man,
I've got a kind of but go ahead, Max, if you got one.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's crazy because Cruise Control and I used to do. We'd go around to a bunch of open mics around back when he lived out here, and
for rap stuff.
No, we were comedians. We were actually.
Oh, that's right. I saw that in there, but I just thought for a second maybe it was because of rap.
We did that too.
We did all kinds. We're just a very diverse bunch of dudes.
I run an improv comedy troupe here in
sweet.
where I live. So it's so I know about performing and stuff. Been doing it for 30 years.
But the bitch was, we would go and it would all be a bunch of us, comedians, and we'd all go to all these open mics. Well, it was kind of hard to laugh at the same jokes. You want to support your fellow comedian, but you're like, fuck, man, I heard this joke 6 times already. You know what I'm saying?
You guys are true open micers, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're performing in most open mics, like 95% of the time, you're performing for just whoever you can get.
Nobody, because everyone else performed before you because they had a better.
Yeah, because you're on. Well, because they drew a better number, right? So if there's 20 comics, and you, God forbid, you're like comic 18, 19, or 20. By the time you get up, there's only the people who are just the last few people.
Yeah,
and maybe
because they don't stay. No one stays.
Yeah, the audience all took off. Exactly. And like you said, there's people that they're not even listening to your jokes. At this point, they just, and here, in Vegas, everybody goes into the bars and they gamble, and they're more concerned about, getting the high score on poker and getting a royal flush than the asshole on stage. You know what I'm saying? So,
I know. You ever notice that when you're gambling, like somebody could have a heart attack like next to you, medical will be coming, and people are like, "Can you get his ass out of here?" I mean, like, I'm trying to shoot craps over here. You know what I mean?
That's Vegas.
It's almost as annoying as somebody like you got a really hot table and you're shooting craps, and you have that one asshole comes up with like one single $100 bill, and they lean in. They're like, "Excuse me, I'm kind of new at this," and they go to drop their money, and like everybody in the table is just rocking and rolling, and they put that money out very delicately, and they'll just drop it. Meanwhile, you're trying to shoot dice, it hits their hand, you 7 out, the whole table's pissed off. Those people, honestly, run your car into a wall. Thank you.
Well, this is video poker, though. They love video poker.
Oh, I know, but it's just any type of gambling situation out there. I mean, everybody's always happy when they leave on the plane from wherever they're traveling from to Vegas, and then that plane ride home is very, very quiet.
Oh, that's
very,
the
very
truth.
different.
That's the truth. We were both born and raised in Vegas. So whenever I go back there now, it's like same thing. Yeah, Vegas. Go on a Friday and a Monday morning, and you come back. It's just the quietest flight ever. Vegas is a trip, man.
You guys are truly open micers because that's the truth of it. But you got to go through that process.
Yeah.
Because it's a vetting process. If you're really going to stick with it, you got to go through it. And what led after that is after I started getting those open mics under my belt, some of the people I work with were like, "Hey, man, you do stand-up comedy, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Well, do you mind doing a stand-up comedy?" The first show I remember doing, I might have done one before that, but was for a Longmont command. He was a sergeant at the time. Later became a commander, but he had a liver transplant that he needed. And they were like, "Can you put a show together?" And so we did. And we raised a lot of money for him, like several $1,000s. And it was great, but I only had like 7 minutes at the time. So I got a bunch of my friends that were at Comedy Works to go out there, and we did like a showcase, and we did like an hour-and-a-half show. It was great. And I started doing that. People started asking me more and more. And so I started producing these shows to help people that were in medical need. A couple of guys I grew up with working at the sheriff's office, they ended up being, one needed a heart transplant and one needed a liver transplant also besides him. So it was just crazy. These cops were in medical need. And I was able to help out with that. And at the same time, do stand-up comedy, which I didn't even realize it was going to take me there.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Just you never know where things are going to lead you sometimes.
No.
Well,
and you got to take the opportunities.
Yep.
Like people always say, like, "Well, hey, I'll give you a chance if you want to come over and do this show." And people think sometimes, "Well, that's beneath me," or whatever. Listen, man, every opportunity you have when you're coming up, you have to take it, because you don't know where it's going to lead. You don't know who's going to be in the audience and sees you, and then they're like, "Hey, man, you did a great job. Can you come do my show?" Or can you? And the whole thing you're trying to do, just like when you're becoming a cop, you got to get reps. Making traffic stop after traffic stop after traffic stop, so you hone your skills. Whether you're going to be a rapper, you got to repeat those lyrics, you got to feel the cadence. Same thing in stand-up comedy. You got to learn to understand it's not just the timing, everything, improv, anything, right? You're not going to get good at it without getting the reps in. And so I always tell people.
Also, it's also like, what are you doing it for? I mean, are you doing it are you doing it because you enjoy it? Because if you enjoy it, you're going to do as much as you can anyways, because you really enjoy doing it. Or are you doing it to make it or be big? And, I mean, obviously some people are, and that's fine. But if you don't enjoy it, then there's no, what's the point? That's kind of where you're at. It must also like help that you actually had a reason to do it besides like, quote unquote, making it big is like relieving that stress from work and that, dealing with all that shit, from that in that way.
COVID was a real test in our household.
I bet.
We lost in 2020, I don't even know how many shows. We probably lost 40 shows that year. And it was absolutely crazy for me not to be on the road doing stand-up comedy. I was doing no comedy except for like a handful of shows online. And when I first was approached by my agent, like, they want you to do a show online, I was like, what? Doing a stand-up comedy show, performing into your phone or into your computer where you just see a screen that's just 20, 30, 50 different screens and people like petting their dog, not paying attention to you, kids running around the house, and you're trying to do a stand-up comedy show and you can't hear their laughter very well. Oh my God, that was a whole nother level. So I had to create the cadence in my head for the most part. But you know what? It made me better. I go, you know what? If I can do that, I can do pretty much anything. But my better half was like, I love you and all, but you need to go back on the road, because she had never spent so much time with me not doing stand-up comedy.
Man.
Apparently, I'm a little bit of a pain in the ass, which is true. I am.
Yeah, you probably needed to, because you're also you're used to
yeah,
like I said, being out and being active, because it must be a full schedule, because you do both now. Basically, you go out and also continue to work with law enforcement.
How do you juggle that? Yeah. How do you juggle that?
That is like probably the number one question. Besides, well, the top two questions I get asked. One is when I come off stage, people always ask me, "Are you really a cop?" And I go, "Yes." Why would you ask me that? And because I'm curious to what their responses. And they're always like, "I've never met a funny cop in my life," and that makes so much sense to me, because like, think about it. People getting contacted by cops, usually it's for traffic violations
or something.
Right? So
it's not a good thing usually. You're not.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a good thing. We don't pull people over and be like, you know what, that was the best 3-point turn I've ever seen in my entire life.
Exactly.
Although, you know what, man, I'll watch these body cam videos, and there are parts where once they've got the suspect in custody or whatever, they'll talk amongst themselves as officers, and they're like, "Hey, man, I saw you coming down that hill, man. I was going to be like fucking something," and they're really cutting up, man. And I'm like, okay, yeah, they do have a sense of humor.
Of course they do. I think that's the secret, is how the hell do you see all that shit, see dead bodies, deal with shooting, being shot at, deal with wondering if someone's going to pull something on you or do something crazy, or if you're going to be the next guy on TV for doing something quote unquote, whatever. How do you not have a sense of humor to deal with that shit? Because you lose your shit if you don't, probably. So I think cops probably have some of the best sense of humor, is that they just don't have to show it. They don't have to show it all the time.
Right.
Well, I feel like a lot of people feel like they can't, because they don't want to be seen as like being unprofessional. I'm like, you know what? Probably in 2024 now, where we're at in law enforcement, you got to show that human side. You have to be able to joke with people. If you joke with the community, I mean, nothing that's raw or dirty, but like, just joke around, like keep it light. You know what I mean?
Right.
Life is too short. I mean, today we can't be like that anymore, because we're not robots, and people definitely need to see the other side of us. And one of the things I thought you just touched on right there, where you're like, you see them cut up, it's got to be not personal. If the bad guy runs and we finally get him, we gunpoint him, whatever we got to do, get him in custody, the scene's over. Even cutting it up with a bad guy, it's not necessarily inappropriate. I mean, like, if you're just like joking around, like, "Hey man, you doing all right?" And, it's been a rough day for you. Yeah, I get it. All that stuff. Coming right back down to normal, so at least you treat them well. I learned a big lesson when I used to watch Dog the Bounty Hunter. I don't know if you guys were fans of Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Oh God!
But he would get super. I actually just met him. I did a show with him. He was speaking at a keynote where I was performing in Illinois, Champaign, Illinois, and I got to meet him. I shook his hand. I told him face to face. I said, "Dog, I love you, man." He goes, "Why is that?" And I said, "Let me tell you what. Every time you catch a bad guy, even if you had to say some things you probably shouldn't have said, or you had to run them down and they were getting a pain in the ass, you always treated him like a human being afterwards. And you said, we're going to help you get through this," and maybe gave him a cigarette and put their cuffs in the front, but you never treated them like they were not human. You always brought it back down. And I think that's a great example, whether it be a bounty hunter or a police officer. You can't have contempt of cop if you treat people like they're human beings. And I'm not saying that I wasn't necessarily an overzealous young kid. I think that's why they sent me to jail, to get some experience and be humbled out a little bit. But you got to get to the point in your career where you understand this is not personal. It is a career and a profession, but you can't take yourself too seriously. And you certainly can't take, your interactions with the community so serious that they just feel like you're robotic. You got to be a human being. You got to let that personality and that humor that you just talked about. And cops have some of the best damn humor. If you would ever sit in a briefing anywhere in the country with cops that are getting ready to hit the street, that dark humor and that back and forth in the amount of shit we give each other, you think the citizens have no idea how bad we are to each other. As far as, God forbid you crash a car on duty. Holy shit. Everybody in the entire shift is going to know about it before the night's over.
Yeah. I gotta actually, as you mentioned it earlier about trauma and stress and just dealing with it.
Yeah.
How many? Because it seems like how many cops don't have that? Because it seems like obviously it's been a godsend for you in terms of personally. It seems like being able to go out there and do something else. How much do you think of that problem with police officers? Like I said, we have a lot of people on a lot of I mean, one of our focuses has been the trauma and PTSD and just different ways of cops dealing with stuff. How much of that do you think that has helped you? Because how many police officers don't have a hobby? They don't have hobbies. They go home and they don't have the kind of other things that you do. Like you have almost like another career basically besides what you're doing.
Well, I learned from Dr. Kevin Gilmartin. He speaks directly about this. He has a book called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. It's for both people that are the actual cops and their spouses.
Families, yeah.
And he talks about when people come home, like the only way to equate it. So if you had a line, like, you're looking at a line in space, and the cop gets the call, okay, disturbance, people fighting, that line shoots right up in the air. And then all of a sudden, oh no, it's not really a fight. It was a misunderstanding. The line comes back down. And then, but you're always a little bit of this heightened state of awareness. So the cop already sits above that line just a little bit. And then they go off duty. Well, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, as he explains. And when people go home, they drop way below that line. And that's why cops, when they go home, and this is me at times, even to today, but I'm more aware of it now than I've ever been in my life. I come home and, my better half's, well, where do you want to go eat? And I'm like, I really don't care, wherever you want to go. Well, let's go do something. No, I just kind of want to hang out. I really don't want to go do anything. You got to force yourself to find whatever it is. And he said, don't become one of those people that I used to go fishing. I used to spend time with my kids. I used to spend time with my wife.
Yeah.
So I tell young people in this career right now, I say, listen, whatever it is that is, you alluded to it earlier with me, whatever you're passionate about, whatever you truly like, you have to be focused on making time to do that. So even if it's something as monotonous, I could never do it, is tying fishing lures or fishing fish. I don't know what the heck, fish flies.
Fly fish.
Yeah.
Fly fishing. I'm sorry, I'm not a good fish person, but I know there are people that I work with that love to do that. And you know what? If you love to do that, whatever disconnects you and makes you happy and brings you back out of that rut, that's all that matters. And as long as you're staying focused on that. And the other thing also is being very open with your colleagues and being very open with your family. And what I mean, you don't have to come home and say, hey, honey, a guy blew his brains out tonight. But you could come home and say, we had a really tough call tonight. This guy died. He killed himself. A lot of families where they got the husband, the wife, whoever the cop is, or sometimes both, they don't share those things. So the other person feels like they're isolated and they're not living that life with that person truly. So then resentment builds up, those things. Having the ability and the strength to communicate, because a lot of times they think, oh, I'm going to protect them and shield them from this. Well, it just ends up blocking them out completely. Yeah. And the other component is just making sure that at work, if you're struggling with something, tell your partners, listen, man, I'm really struggling with what I saw last night. I've been on a call where I've seen a captain for a fire department just absolutely breaking down in the back of their rig, and behind the rig is their whole crew. And they're like, oh my God, what's going on? The captain's losing his mind right now. And I had to go up there and I put my arm around that captain. I said, it's all right, man. I've been where you're at. I said, God bless you. I said, we're going to help you out. And then I walked and talked to that crew and I said, listen, you guys need to get in there and you need to be with him. It's okay to feel bad about what you saw. And what they had seen was a young 14, 15-year-old kid hang himself. And that is a tough call to go on. I don't give a shit who you are. And so being okay with people being uncomfortable or feeling bad about what they saw or having an emotional response to it, there's nothing wrong with that. And us reducing the stigma around that is what is going to make us better. Because when we talk about things, like we're even talking right now, when you really feel pent up about something, you go find your friend and you confide in them and you say, bro, this is what happened, sister, this is what happened, and this is what's going on. And after you talk to them, you always feel better. Well, you got to decompress that. That's why it's so important that we do after action reviews and we do these debriefs right after stressful events, wherever we have them within the organization for critical incidents.
Now, I know on John Wiley's show, you talked a little bit about using dark humor sometimes that people wouldn't understand. And that's kind of the reason with us being Nothing Sacred. We started out as just improvers that would record our shit, and we did songs and skits, and nothing was sacred. I mean, we attacked everything, and I think that's kind of the key, man. To be able to do that, and some people, they're critical of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think some of the more soft people, I describe them as soft today, where everything is so sterile around them. In the world of law enforcement, there's never going to be a sterile environment. It's just a constant chaos. You can go from having lunch with your pal at work to the house being on fire. You just don't know what it is, right? The dark humor for me is really, I think, what helped me connect with my audiences. And one of the things I just recently started talking about, and I'll take you down the road, that dark humor. I'm pretty well known, I think, for the bit where I talk about the guy committing suicide, and the guy, he shoots himself, and we get there. I was a field training officer at the time. We get there, the guy's dead, clearly no head, and we have to call the on-call detective. And the detective that came that night happened to be one of the guys I was an explorer with way back in the day. And he gets there and he starts rooting around the guy's pockets, and he finds the driver's license in the wallet, and he looks at the license, and he looks across the car at me, he looks at the license, he looks at me, he has a smile on his face, and takes his thumb, he covers the head on the license and holds it up and says, "Do you think this is our guy right here?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
his head, his
and
face.
so everybody, like, every time I tell this bit, everybody always gets like really like stoic at this point.
Oh,
And people are like, "Oh my God, whoa, wow," right? Especially if it's an audience that's not law enforcement. And I just let it sit there, that uncomfortableness, like let that soak all the air out of the room. And then I go into the next bit where I'm like, bro, I don't know that I agree. And he's like, "Why don't you agree?" I'm like, "Bro, it says he has green eyes. It's clear he has blue eyes. One blue that way and one blue the other way." And everybody just dies, right? And then there's two other punchlines that are after that, but it's really dark. And I couldn't do that. If I went to a college around the country right now, I could not do that joke. I think they would set the entire campus on fire because they just couldn't take that in very well. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what my feelings are. And I started talking about my dad recently. It's not a lot of the stuff isn't out on recordings yet, but my dad, I lost him to cancer in January of '99, and he was going to hospice at the house. I'm sorry, hospice was at the house with him. And this is pretty dark, but I at the time, the day he died, he was up and walking and talking, and the hospice nurse was like, don't go to work. Your dad's going to pass today. I'm like, get out of here. How do you know? Hospice nurses, I'm going to tell you right now, gentlemen, they know when things are going to happen. Yeah. And my dad started sitting on the couch later that day, and he put his head against his hand, and they laid him down. And the lady took out this vial of morphine, and she started putting drops in his mouth. And she looks at me at one point. She's like, "He's very comfortable. He's not feeling anything." And I was like, "That's good, because you don't want your family, especially your parents, to feel anything and feel bad, hurt." Yeah. Because it was cancer is such a hard.
Oh yeah.
Fucking sucks.
Yeah. No, I just lost a friend to cancer last year.
My dad pancreatic cancer. And
so it's a terrible thing, but it took me a long time to process this. And then one night I was sitting there and I was thinking, I was like, I wonder if my dad's death certificate actually has the right cause of death. And the reason I thought that, I was like, did my dad truly die of the cancer, or did she give him so much morphine that he basically overdosed? You know what I mean? Should have been more like homicide or unintended assisted suicide? That is dark shit to talk about. When I talk about that on stage, I did this for the Colorado Springs Police Department like 2 weeks ago, and I talked about that, and I lined that up actually as jokes. Dude, they loved it. They ate it up. But if I took that down to Comedy Works in Denver and did that for the normal crowd, they'd be like, "You were the sickest bastard I've ever met in my life." So,
well, and you did also talk about how you mess with the ethnic humor, where now that's almost taboo. You remember the old shows, Archie, All in the Family, Sanford and Son. They went there
Andrew
all
Dice
the time.
Clay.
Yeah, Andrew Dice Clay, they all went there. But now it's like everybody's such a snowflake; they're afraid to attack that, man, and it sucks. It's again trying to turn comedy into sterility.
Yeah, and I broach that, especially when I talk about my culture, being Mexican and stuff like that. I'm not gonna not be me. I think there's so much value in my culture. There's certain things I like to poke fun at. It's just part of who I am, and you know what? That's just the way it's gonna be for me. And I'm not going to tread into other cultures because I really don't feel like I could do that. But you know what? When it comes to the Latinos, I got some shit to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I got a question. Oh,
no, I was just finishing off with, I think that's all funny. Even when Eddie Murphy used to make fun of white guys and, shit like that. I found humor in all that, but that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, people can get offended about everything today. I mean, there's just nothing, there's people that have yelled at me like, "Oh my God, you're making fun of suicide." And I'm like, I'm not talking about making fun of suicide. I'm talking about the dark humor that we use in our field in order to survive this job. But you don't understand that because you can't see from our perspective. And if you would just quit being selfish for a second and just thinking about the way you think and see and experience, we have a different point of view and a different experience. It doesn't make you that you're wrong, that it doesn't resonate with you. If it doesn't resonate with you and it bothers you, look, I'm sorry, but like this is something that is so coveted by what we do. Without that dark humor, there are cops every single place around this country right now that are dealing with critical incidents, and they're out of the public eye, and they're talking to each other, and they're using dark humor to deal with the sick shit that is right in front of them.
Yeah, if you want to know why people are using dark humor, blame yourselves for doing all that stupid shit that the cops have to see. Yeah, it's like
exactly.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. Though. It's a little different take.
Sure.
So obviously, one of the biggest fears for people, especially performers, or is going on stage. I'm wondering, what's scarier, having a crazy moment as a cop, or going on your first actual full comedy special that you've done for yourself, where you're the main headliner? What's scarier, getting up on stage doing a new bit, or going out and doing police work?
Boy, man, I would probably say it's still the police work.
I'm sure. Well, live
to say that you're not scared ever. I was one of the later first responders that responded to King Soopers in Boulder almost 2 years ago. We had plenty of people already inside, but having the notion of what was going down at the time, that was definitely scary. That's as real as it gets, right?
Yeah.
Having supervised officers that have been involved in officer-involved shootings, and you're responding to that call while they're dealing with that, especially when you're a supervisor and you care so much about your men and women that you're responsible for. That is probably worrying about others. That today is probably the scariest piece. It's unfortunate we lose anybody, but the men and women that I'm responsible for, God, that is the thing that worries me a lot. And so that is probably the scariest thing that I face now in the role that I'm in. But, getting up to do a new bit, yeah, you feel that exhilaration and that nervousness, but I don't ever think that it will compare to the pucker factor. That it goes with the real
pucker
job.
Factor. That's a good way of looking. That might be the best way of looking at it. Like probably you are probably the best person to deal with that kind of like stage fright or dealing, because a lot of people say the scariest thing they ever do is public speaking or being in front of people, like speaking.
Oh, I love it.
But you probably like, shit, man, I've been shot at. Fuck this shit. I've seen car wrecks. I've seen this. I've had to deal with all this shit, being in front of people making jokes.
Yeah, I shot a car like in 2002 or 3 to disable it. 2001, I can't remember. It was early 2000s, and there wasn't really a policy on it. There is now. I'll tell you that right now. There is a policy on it now.
Did you make that policy? Was it because of you?
It was because of me, and people attribute that policy to me to this day.
Wow.
But I remember making that decision to do that, and the investigation that followed, and I got cleared and everything. But like, you want to talk about a pucker factor, when you're under the scrutiny like that. Yeah, I mean, it's the reality of part of the job, and you can make a decision or a mistake in this job, and there is no backseas. There's nothing I'm gonna do as a stand-up comedian that's ever gonna put anybody's life in jeopardy.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
That's where the difference is. The decisions I make, even as a supervisor, even when I was a deputy responding, the first one there, decisions that I was making or that I make today, those have impacts on people's lives. So there is a bigger stress factor for me with that completely. And when I get to go release on a stage, and there's, I opened for my friend, he gave me a guest set at the Paramount Theater in Denver, probably a couple years ago now, John Christ, who I came up with. And it was so much fun. There's 2,000 people in the crowd. The roar of the laughter was just amazing. And I didn't want to get off. He's like, look, dude, I think he gave me like 10 minutes. He's like, don't go past the 10 minutes. And I was honestly thinking, fuck it, I'm just going to do 20, 30, see how this goes. Because I was absolutely shredding, but I didn't. I did my time and I got off. But that is such an exhilarating feeling. And when I get done doing an hour 15 now, and I've got that crowd just rolling, and people come up and they're like, man, I needed that. I really needed to laugh, especially when you got that one guy who's sitting right up front with their arms crossed, like "fuck you, I'm not gonna laugh. I'm not a laughing kind of guy." And you finally get to him and bust him up. Yeah, that's what my goal is at that point in time. I'm gonna fucking make you laugh. I'm gonna point you out. I'm gonna find something about your ass, and I'm gonna make you laugh.
Well, that's why would you go to a comedy show if you're not a laughing kind of guy, though?
Why would you sit up front?
Right. Because a lot of significant others drag their significant others
That's
to shows.
true.
You know what I mean?
Oh, like yeah, they want to see it, but the dude, he's like, man, fuck this. I don't even want to be here.
They were voluntold. You know what I mean? That's what we call it in the business. They were voluntold.
Right.
Voluntold. That's funny. Man. So maybe it's something that somebody should do is they should actually, if you want to learn how to public speak, or you just have someone go on a drive along with you to gain some perspective. Like, see, life, getting in front of people ain't that hard to deal with the shit that I have to do.
You know, it's funny. I've said this before, but cops are some of the best actors in the entire world. And you're like, well, give me an example. I can't tell you how many times I've seen myself or my partners, we'll be out on a call, we'll run somebody, they'll have a warrant. We're 20 or 30 minutes away from cover. And the guy knows he's got a warrant. And he's like, oh, so am I going to jail? And you're like, nah, man, listen, dispatch hasn't got back to me yet. Let's not put the cart before the horse. Hey, man, so I see you have that bracelet on. Are you diabetic or something like that? Or maybe they have a shirt that has ACDC. Hey, you like ACDC, Back in Black or whatever, whatever you can do to stall and to create time until your partner can roll up. That's what you're doing. And they do great jobs of being creative. And I watch this, and it's truly an art form because you have to think on your feet. This is the one job where there is no set structure. There's policies, which are guidelines, but there is no set thing of this is exactly how it's going to go. And I think that's why so many people get into law enforcement and EMS, firefighting, paramedics. No one day is the same. It may be a similar type of call, but each one has their own nuances that has millions of different combinations in order to make it up its own composition.
That's cool, man.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, thinking on your feet. Have you ever gotten, because I find this comical, these sovereign citizens, which is really, have you ever had to deal with that? And how did you, get through all it?
A lot of acting.
Yeah, a lot of like appealing to, look, there's no winning with them, and God forbid they decide to focus on you. You're going to be in for something because I've seen people at our agency have them write letters and send all these things, and at the end of the day is not letting your ego get the best of you and get frustrated. Appealing to like, listen, we got to work this out. We got to figure it out. Maybe using some other mechanisms to do research to figure out who this person is to reach the same goal besides just trying to get the information from them. Oftentimes they don't want to identify themselves. So running the information on the car to figure out who that is and, work it from a different angle, right? Sitting there and having a pissing match with somebody at the side of the car door is really not going to do any good. It's not going to be constructive. And today, especially with, using force on something that's only a traffic offense, we really don't want to do that. So trying to get to the resolution without having to do that, and the simplest way to do it today in 2024 is not letting your ego get in the way. And I got to applaud the men and women coming into this job today, because the whole way of things are being done today is completely different than when I got hired. And they're coming into a time where it's tumultuous, where law enforcement is not looked at as the most positive thing in the world. So the men and women coming into this today, I really take my hat off to them, because it is a different game than it was when I got into the career.
Yeah,
that's crazy. And that was like 20 something years ago, right?
Yeah, I got hired in 1998.
Oh, 98. Awesome. Okay. Wow.
Well, why don't you go ahead and throw out some places where you'd like people to go to catch your stuff and what you're doing. Obviously, Dakota says you got a special recorded in October. What's going on with you now, and how can people reach out to find you?
So anybody can reach out to me if they just type Vinnie Montez on Google or anything. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Everything is just my name, Vinnie, Vinnie Montez, or go to VinnieMontez.com. There's also a documentary in the works. I know you had Jason Harney on the show.
Right? You know Jason, huh?
Yeah, Jason was on the show, and we have been working on a documentary it's all filmed, and it's going to come out here in 2024. And it goes through basically my entire life, from my family upbringing all the way through becoming a cadet until coming out.
Nice.
Where I'm at today in my life in comedy. It closed with a show in Vegas. The show's so it's a whole thing that I'm so excited about. You guys are actually the first people I've talked to on a platform about this. So
awesome.
Shit.
Yeah, so this is pretty cool, and I'm excited. I actually,
hey Max,
yo,
I'm curious before we get more. Did you know that he had talked to John before that you contacted him?
No, had no idea.
That's a small world, man. Pretty awesome shit, man. That's
I had no idea.
Right
that was.
there.
Oh, you talking about Jason? Jason.
I'm sorry, Jason.
Yeah, no. He just now when he mentioned his name, I'm like, oh shit, you know him?
Yeah, because you guys exactly. Had him on talking about wrist lock.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Wrist lock was his little his documentary that he's got on Amazon. Yep.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, so we're coming out with a documentary too, and I was actually talking to him earlier because he's in the middle of the edit right now. It's all in the can. It's just the editing that needs to be done.
Nice, man.
Wow.
So you got a special coming out too, you said?
Yep, a special coming out on Dry Bar that should come out here in early 2024. I'm excited about that.
Awesome.
So yeah, lot going on, man. I'm just trying, it's a lot to keep up with, you know.
Did you I thought you said you did a thing at a juvenile facility out here. Is that something? Because I talked about that.
I didn't do a show at a juvenile facility. What I did at a juvenile facility, right when I came on, right before I was officially brought on to HTV, Humanize the Badge, I went out on a Project Human event, and it was like me, Deputy Hookem and Bookem, oh no, it's the Popo, Deputy Misdemeanor, Officer Daniels, Mike the Cop. We all went out there, and that was right after, I'm trying to remember, right after the Mandalay Bay shooting. And we were helping with some fundraiser for the cops' wives or something like that, that were out there. And then one of the other things that we did was we went to the juvenile facility, one of the correctional juvenile facilities there. AJ, who's Ono's the Popo, he's a Columbus PD officer in Ohio. Him and I specifically talked to a group in that detention facility, and it was so amazing because AJ comes from an inner city, and he came from a really tough upbringing where there are a lot of gangs and drugs and stuff like that. And so him and I were in there, and the whole idea was to, like, a lot of these kids had gun charges and stuff. And the whole idea was to bridge the gap between their experiences with law enforcement and just kind of try to humanize us as law enforcement with them and build that bridge to reduce that gap. And it was one of the most inspirational moments I've ever had, just because listening to these kids talk and then listening to AJ talk from his upbringing, how things could have turned out different for him, was absolutely awesome. And then probably my favorite part after that happened directly after they said, hey, there's this place called Shake Shack. And I ended up doing a bit about it, but they took us this place called Shake.
Who's going to the Shake Shack?
Yeah,
that's right. Go, are you paying, or who's paying?
Who's paying? Everybody's like, you are. Everywhere I go, they always turn that shit back on me. But it was amazing. And so I think it's so good because taking the time to have that conversation, and that's what I do on every airplane ride. Every once in a while, I get an asshole that I sit next to that doesn't want to talk to me, and I do take that personal. I'm like, who doesn't?
Who won't want to talk to me?
Who doesn't want to talk to me? But I do realize there are people that are introverted and they don't want to put themselves out there. So I need to be a little more patient.
Actually, is AJ the guy, when you watch Columbus Police Body Cam, which is a YouTube channel, there's a cop they show a lot on
I'm
that.
Sure.
Is that him?
Tall, lean guy. Yeah, absolutely. Black guy.
You know, this is a white guy, I think. You're talking to a blind dude here, man. So I don't know what he looks like. I just hear his voice. He sounds white to me, but
yeah, look it up. Just type in "Oh no, it's the Popo" on Instagram, or just type in "dancing cop" or "Oh no, it's Popo" on Google. AJ Anthony Johnson, Columbus PD. He speaks at Harvard. That dude, he is doing amazing things in the community right now.
Cool, man.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Somebody like I would recommend you guys having on the show even.
Cool.
We'd love to have him. If you want to, you know what? Maybe after this, we'll you can exchange information. You know, as far as you can shoot me his info or something.
Sure. He'd be great for something like this, and he is no holds, but he's got some super good experiences. About crazy stuff that's happened to him and working in that role, and now he works in the office of the chief, if I understand correctly, and they have him doing direct stuff with the public, which is so cool.
Nice,
sweet, man.
Nice. Cool. I bet you Vinnie knows Randy Sutton too.
Oh yeah, I just did a show for them. That's where we filmed my special at the Ahern Hotel for the Blue.
Oh
Oh my gosh.
Was it the Brothers in Blue?
No. Oh my gosh. It's gonna punch me. Wounded Blue.
About the seminar, the trauma seminar that they do every.
Yes, the Wounded Blue seminar in Las Vegas, Nevada. We were just there in September. I think it was like the 23rd or the 29th that we filmed the special. I closed one of the nights with the entertainment doing that for that group.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah, that's a really cool hotel too. I like
yeah.
Ahern. So, and Randy's a cool dude. We've had him on the show. So,
sure.
But yeah, awesome stuff, man.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is about a good time to wrap this up. Let you get some rest.
Okay. Yeah.
Having a long,
no worries at all.
A long one. It was a good, and great time, man. Been great talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me on, and I wish you guys all the best. And hope we get to meet you guys in person at some point.
I hope so, man. I hope so. And we'll
come to a show. I'll have you be my guest.
Awesome.
We'd love to. Matter
of fact, you know what? I'm coming out to the Red Rock Casino to perform, and I came for California law enforcement something in August. And let's keep in touch, and I'll have you guys as my guest at that show.
So I'll reach out to you in like end of July or something. Just kind of remind you, like, hey, man.
Yeah. It's like in the first couple weeks of August.
Cool.
Okay. Awesome.
All right, guys.
Well, we're going to end this off real quick. Let's do it in the way we do it here.
Well, hold on. So just stick with us after we end this off for just a second.
Sure.
And we'll go from there. But this has been a Nothing Sacred interview with Vinnie Montez. I am Cruise Control.
And I'm Maxwell Silverhammer.
And that's the story there.
Bitches.
Later.
See ya.
We are nothing sacred. We are nothing sacred. We are nothing sacred.
With Maxwell Silverhammer.
We are nothing sacred. With cruise control. We are nothing sacred.